Okay, so the name of the chapter is quadratic function. Now, in order to understand what is a quadratic function, you will need to understand what a function is. So a function is anything that takes an input that gives an output. That is basically the most summarized and easy definition of function I could give that you need right now. And now, how would a function become quadratic? A function would become quadratic if the highest if it is the degree of power 2, if it is a degree of 2, because quadratic basically means a square of a variable or a term. So ax squared plus bx plus c, that this would be a quadratic function. This is a standard quadratic function where a, b and c are real numbers and a cannot be 0, because then the x term would become 0 and then it won't be a quadratic function anymore, it would be a linear function. Now, analyzing quadratic function, you need to understand that the quadratic function, the graph of quadratic function is a parabola. There is a smiley face and a frowny face. Okay, this is how it goes. Now it opens up or down depending on a. Now what is a, you'll get to see later, but it is up if a is positive, it is down if a is negative. Okay, a positive, a negative. Now the highest or the lowest point is the vertex. Now the mid part of it is the vertex, and if it's low, that means a is positive. If it's low, that means a is positive. So this is like an inverse relation, inverse. That's the easiest way to understand it. If a is positive, vertex would be minimum. If a is negative, vertex would be maximum. If vertex is maximum, a would be negative. If the vertex is minimum, a would be positive. So that is it. Now this is the thing that we are going to deal with, the first question, and it is fx is equal to, fx is a function, quadratic function, ax plus a into x plus h whole square plus k. Completing the square is a technique that is used to rewrite quadratic function ax plus b x plus c into this form. So basically we're going to use the completing square method in order to convert the standard quadratic function into a x plus h whole square plus k. Now here a few terms mean something. A basically describes whether the parabola is up or down, and whether the vertex is high or low. Now now we have some formulas. Basically we are set to graph the quadratic function, so we need a few things for that, and there is x and y axis. Now x-axis is basically the h in our term, and y is basically the k. Now the formula of finding h is minus b over 2a, you will need to memorize this, and k is c minus b squared over 4a. But you don't need to use this formula for k, because there's a better formula, which is k is equal to f into h. Now if you multiply the function, if you put the values of x, if you replace the value of x by h in the function, basically what I mean is, for example, if we figured out that the value of h is, for example, 2, what we would do is put this value into the original function, and then we would get after solving it, we will get the value of k. So this is how we get the value of k. And that now we have the completing square thing. This would be much more easier when you know the basics of factorization, and I hope so you guys know that. So one tip is that basically we need to add and subtract a term which is the b term. And how to find the b term? This is basically the product of a and b multiplied by 2. A is usually the x term, so you don't need to worry about that. The x term is usually alone without any constant value attached to it, so you only need to figure out what is being multiplied by b, what is being multiplied by 2, so that we are getting this 2ab term. Now in order to do that, you can just divide this by 2, you'll get 3. So you need to add the square of 3 and subtract the square of 3 in order to complete the formula. And once you get the formula, you get the form of a into x minus h whole square plus k. And so what we need to do is we need to find the maximum or minimum value of the function. Now that is being decided by the a term. I said if a is positive, which basically means if it is greater than 0, then the vertex would be at its lowest. So if the vertex it would be at its lowest, then the function would be of a minimum value. So the minimum value of a function is at x. What is x? X is basically the h term. Okay, now x is, I tell you what, we need to find the x. Now this is basically x minus h equal to 0. You could put it like this. Now if you move the x to the right side, you will get positive h, which will be the value of x. So we need to find the value of maximum or minimum value of the function at x, which will be this additional term k. Okay, so the x here is minus 3. Why is it minus 3? We are left with x plus 3. Now this is h. If you move the 3 to the other side of the equation, then you will be left with minus 3. So there you have minus 3 is the minimum value function at minus 3 is k, which is 4 in our case. Now the next question is x squared plus 4x, divide this by 2, you'll get 2. So you need to plus and minus the square of 2. You complete the formula by adding the positive term. You always add the positive term to complete the formula, and you leave the minus term alone. The reason for that is we never have a negative b term in the formula a squared plus 2ab plus b, or a squared minus 2ab plus c. The minus or plus sign is always with the 2ab term and never with the a or b term. So you always need to add the b term in order to complete the formula, and you leave the minus b term alone, and that is usually add or subtracted with the additional c term of the quadratic function, and then you have the value of k. So we have this here, and again this basically the same thing. I need to factorize this. I gave you the main concept. Additional thing which I mentioned earlier, but to again mention it, is that here x minus h, we just change the sign of the h term, and that is the value of x. As simple as that. Okay, now we have, this is a bit peculiar. Now this is easy, but it's a bit different from previous questions. Minus x squared minus 3x minus 5. Now you take the minus sign common. Okay, there's the rule of factorization. Just take whatever is being common, and then here that the value of a is in negative, so the function would be at a maximum because the vertex is at its highest point and the graph is at its minimum. So yeah, Yeah, so minus into x plus 3x minus 5, and then divide this by 2, you have 3 over 2, and then you have you plus this and minus, subtract this, and then complete the formula, uh, simplify this, and you have the maximum value of function at x is equal to minus 3 over 2, which is minus 11 over 4. Okay, this is another peculiar question. Is minus 2x squared minus 2 plus 21 over 2. You separate the 21, and then you're left with minus 2x squared minus x, and then you take the 2 common. Now I mentioned earlier that there won't be a constant with the x term, which was a mistake, because we can see there is a constant with the x term, x squared term. So but that doesn't really matter because we're taking it common, so you don't have to really give a fuck about this term because we're taking it common. So when we take this common, we also take the minus sign common, and usually want the x squared term in positive, so because that's standard form. So we are left with x squared plus x over 2. Now I told you to divide this by 2, but here we cannot divide because it is already in division. So actually we can divide this by 2. I'm sorry, I'm doing a bit mistakes, but if we divide x over 2 by 2, we can just separate the 2, and then we can multiply the 2. So x over 2 multiplied by 1 over 2, which is x over 4, and the b term would be 1 over 4. So you can plus and so add and subtract the b term, and then you have this. You can simplify it further, and yeah, one thing is that you have taken the minus sign common, so when you remove the minus term from this bracket, you're gonna multiply it with minus 2. So when you multiply this with minus 2, which is minus 1 over 16, this would become 1 over 8, because it is being multiplied and the minus 1 over 16 is in division form, so it will cut the minus 1 over 16 into half, which is 1 over 8, and then you multiply the minus sign with the minus sign, which is with the plus sign, which is you multiply the minus sign with the minus sign, and then it's a plus sign. Yeah, so that is it. So that was the question number 1, and now we have the question number 2, and it is a bit complicated, but you don't have to worry about that. It's just going to be a short question, hopefully. So find the maximum or minimum point by sketching the 4 living points. Now before we get into anything else, I just want you to tell that usually, not always, but usually you start entering the graph with the x-intercepts or with the y-intercepts. Okay, so you enter the graph at some point, interact with the y line with the x-intercept, and then you touch the x-intercept with the first x1, and then you get away from you basically exit from the x-axis by touching the x2 intercept. So let me say that again. You enter the graph following the y-intercepts through the y-axis, then you touch the x-axis following the x1 intercept, then you exit the x-axis by touching the x2 intercepts. Now this usually doesn't really happen. Let me give you an example. Here we have the y-intercepts 0 and 6, but we have the x-intercept minus 3 and 0 and 2 and 0. Now If we enter the graph following the y-intercept through the y-axis, we can't touch the -3 and 0. How can we do that? Just think about it. If I'm entering the graph here, what I'm gonna do, like do this and like do this? No. You enter the graph from the minimum point, like the most negative point, and then you touch the y-axis from there, and then you'll exit the graph following the x2 axis, which is just a name for convention. So that is how it usually goes. Now, what are these points and how do we do this? Like, how does it work? Now, this takes a while to understand, so if you don't really understand it at first, try to figure it out on your own and sleep on it. You'll get it the next day. But once you get it, you won't really forget it. Okay, so there are three main things. Does the function open up or down? Which is basically the vertex. Does the vertex open up or down? We figured this out by looking at the a term. Okay, if the a is positive, the function is opening down. If the a is negative, the function is opening up. Now, what's the vertex? Okay, because we need the x and y points, which I mentioned earlier, are figured out by finding the h and h term, h and k term, which is x and y axis respectively. So you need to find whether the function is opening up or down, and then what are the h and the values of h and k, and then what's the range. If it's up, then it's from k to infinity. If it is down, then it's minus infinity to k. Now k can be positive or negative, it doesn't really matter. But matter is if it's up or down. Okay, let me give you an example. Here you could see the a is positive, so the function is down. What do we do when the function is down? We go from minus infinity to k. So the range is from, okay, I made a mistake. So basically what it means that if it's up or down, basically means that not the function but the graph itself is up or down. So the graph is up here, so if it's up, then it would be from k to infinity. So just for memorizing, you could say that if it is positive, then k would be positive. If it is positive, then infinity would be positive. If the a is positive, infinity would be positive. If the a is negative, infinity would be negative. Here you can see the range, and that is for range. The domain for these questions, because we don't have any under root, absolute value, or in partial fractions or anything, we can just say that the domain is from minus infinity to infinity. So I hope it's all making sense to you. If it's not, then you could just sleep on it, figure this out on your own. Anyways, now what are the steps to all of these? So we got the main things. We need the a, the vertexes, and the range, because the domain is usually minus infinity to infinity. What we need to find is y and x intercepts. Now, okay, this is the order. Find ABC, find y intercepts, find x intercepts, find k and h, find domain, find range, find minimum maximum value, which would be the k, and then graph it. I'm leaving the graph part because it's too much struggle for a 2-number question, so I guess. So that is basically the main thing. Here we are finding the a, b, and c for xk minus 4x. Put x equal to 0. The thing is that if there is no constant term with x, that basically means the y would usually be the 0 and 0, because the y-axis does not have anything positive or negative on the x-axis. The y-intercept does not have anything with the on the x-axis, anything positive and negative on the x-axis. Okay, so you have x, y. So for x it's 0, for y it is what we found 0, so it would be 0. If there was a constant term here, then the y-intercept would be from 0 to that constant term, which would be 0 to c. Anyways, for x-axis you're going to put y is equal to 0, and then you can take x common. Then you have x into x minus 4, which would be x equal to 0 and x equal to 4. Now the power matters. If you know that the power of x is 2, that means there are going to be two values of x. Now here we have a common intercept. The y-intercept is 0, 0, and the x-intercept, the x1 intercept is also 0, 0, and the x2 intercept is 4, 0. So that doesn't really matter because I'm not gonna